Hola, 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 bienvenidos a 1938, el año de las batallas mayores de la Guerra Civil. And for that reason, let's look into the last part of the Spanish Civil War DLC for Panzer Corps 2. Its 5 missions are covering about a year and 4 months of the remaining stage of the war, as despite their best efforts, the Republicans are crumbling into defeats. You've probably heard about the Battle of the Ebro mission, which overshadows this part of the DLC and is the most difficult mission of the Spanish Civil War DLC and definitely one of the most difficult missions of Panzer Corps 2 so far. It's quite appropriate actually because the Battle of the Ebro was the biggest and the bloodiest battle of that war, and I'll definitely devote some time to it in this video. But first, let's start with Teruel. Let me start with a public service announcement and remind you that Teruel doesn't exist. Now, the actual battle that took place in 1938 was a major attempt by the Republicans to take over a provincial capital, Teruel in this case, and they actually managed to do that in real life. The defenders surrendered. In the game, we're supposed to break through to the nationalist troops inside the city who are very much on their ropes at this point, and this is what you should focus on. On this map, it's very easy to get distracted by all the flanks and everything. You should go straight to the city and try and relieve its defenders. Most likely they will all be destroyed, but your secondary task is to save that little lorry inside the city, and it will not survive if the Republicans take it over before you arrive. So no going north, no going south, go straight southeast. And if you see that the Republicans are about to take over the city and you're actually not far from it, you can actually start moving the lorry towards the safety zone, because for the AI, that unit is not a priority. It much rather engage more interesting targets like infantry. So you can actually squeeze in through enemy lines in there, because it's very likely that you will lose Teruel first, like it happened in real life. As soon as you break through and clear the city, set up your defenses there and don't go anywhere further to the east, because there will be a counterattack. It will be pretty heavy and you'll just suffer unnecessary losses in the open field. Additional notes about the mission: the enemy air force is virtually non-existent here. There's just one I-16 fighter unit in here, so it's very easy to get rid of. However, the weather will be pretty terrible, and your planes are likely to be grounded for much of the mission, which actually is what happened in real life. This region is known for its rather extreme weather, and the winter in 1938 was very harsh, down to minus 18 degrees Celsius. Oh, and the game will also ask you if you would like to spend 3 command points on a prototype of Panzerkampfwagen 2, although its only advantage compared to Panzer 1 is better hard attack, which is not nothing, I guess. Alright, Aragon offensive is an odd one. You are given 28 turns, or 23 with race against time, to finish it, and you really only need about 12 or 13. Why so much time? I don't know. Perhaps they're preparing you for the Ebro. I've got no clue, and I must blab. So, since you've got so much time on your hands, you shouldn't hurry, especially in the beginning of the mission where most of the enemy resistance will take place, especially in the air, so make sure you cover all the soft bits at the start. Once you're done with the initial attack, just advance towards the east. The nationalist troops will do a good job advancing in the south, so you needn't worry about that particular mountain objective. In the east, you'll face a couple of Soviet tank units, T-26s and BT-5s, which are just right in the open field. You'll be able to destroy them with your bombers, and the weather this time will be pretty good. One sticking point there, though, is the upper right corner of the map. The Republicans have got lots of artillery on the other side of the wide river, and they're not very easy to reach. The good news is that they're not covering any defenders, so they're just shooting over the river on the enemy turn, so make sure you don't stand next to those areas, especially around the airport between the villages. Let the nationalists handle the dirty work. Although I've found that breaking through at Amposta is slightly easier than Tortosa, and since you have to take over that southern objective anyway, so it's a bit closer to the main business of the day. The thing is, the entire southeast of the map is virtually empty, and you'll have nothing to do there. Once you've dealt with the initial attack at the start of the mission, past that, it's very little resistance, and you will be able to surround the enemies holed up in the mountains by turn 12, 13, 14, or thereabouts, without losing too many units, and without any worry at all. So go ahead, it's very easy. Enjoy the war while it's still nice. Let's handle the bigger now. The briefing is telling you that this is going to be a Republican offensive and you're supposed to defend. And let me tell you, I've tried. I've tried to play the scenario as a defensive one because all of my Panzer Corps player sensibilities and experience suggest that if you counterattack, you're going to face a new wave of attacking enemies and it never ends well. In the Battle of the Ebro, on the other hand, I've never been able to hold all of the objectives by the end of the mission just playing defensively. It never happens, and it's very easy to see why. The enemy have a much better position on their side of the river, with all the hills and the artillery posted on them, and how the heck are you supposed to hold Benissanet if it's on a river and covered by enemy artillery? There is no way for you to provide any cover to the defenders, so the answer here is clear. Offense is the best defense, and fortune favors the bold, and yada yada yada. We have to attack first and clear the entire eastern bank of the river just to be able to survive. The enemy units might seem endless, but they are not, and the first reinforcement wave they get is around turn 12 to 13, which gives you plenty of time to clear all that annoying artillery and AA guns from the eastern bank. So my initial strategy is to break through at Asco. The reason for this location is that there are hills on your side of the river, which means your artillery will be more effective, plus there is a forest around Asco discouraging any enemy mobile counterattacks. Make sure you send your best troops, your top tanks, your best heroes, into the breach. They must be able to destroy enemy tanks and armored cars and support units very quickly, and then advance towards north, towards Flix, and relieve Ribarroja. At the same time, in the south, the nationalists will generally do a reasonable job holding most of the objectives, or at least preventing the nationalists from crossing the river. Once the north is clear, direct your lead troops south and destroy the enemy besieging Mora de Ebro, Benissanet, and Miravet was where I was stopped, because there were quite a few enemy units waiting there from the beginning of the mission, plus, on turn 13, the southern wave started, which was essentially an ideal position because you have all of those elite troops sitting there and waiting to grind up that wave. Once the wave is destroyed, I recommend dealing with the artillery on the hill east of Miravet, and then splitting your forces. One part should go further south and west to clear out the remaining areas and secure those objectives, and the other part should go center to prepare for another wave, which will take place around turn 18. Once they're destroyed, rinse and repeat, go north. There will be an attack some 3 to 4 turns later. And this is where I enjoy the unexpected advantage of race against time, because my turn limit is reduced 5 turns and I don't need to experience all of the waves, but you can see that you already control the eastern bank, and the ability of the Republicans to break through anywhere has been completely compromised, and your mobile troops will only have to work as a fire brigade just deflecting these attacks. A few points about your force composition. Do everything to improve your AA capability. I had 3 BF-109s and 8 top-of-the-line Italian fighters, and I was doing just okay, because the Republicans will throw real hordes against you in the air. Be prepared for that. And even I, the known hater of AA guns, actually bought myself one and quite enjoyed its performance. Also, it would be a good idea to stock up on Italian infantry and Italian AT guns to replace defenders in all of those villages and be able to withstand mobile attacks in the later parts of the mission. Finally, at the beginning of the mission, the game will offer you to spend 10 10 commendation points to buy a unique hero, Adolf Galland, no less. He's got quite a few traits. At the moment of this video, the aiming assistance and leadership traits don't work with planes, but even without those working, is pretty useful, especially with his legendary traits, which gives you 50 prestige points every turn. This guy will pay off very quickly. Catalonia is an optional mission, but I really don't see any reason not to take it, because it's clearly intended as a therapy session for you to heal up right after the glimpse into the void of total war you got at the Ebro. You can pretty comfortably play a biker gang at Catalonia, a place where the police are apparently equipped with Mr. Whippy vans, foam bats and silly string, and there are more things to loot and kill than you can imagine. This map really reminds me of the old style beat-em-up games where you're supposed to beat up a car and destroy it just for points you can't lose. This is what it is, really, so don't take any fighter planes, there will be no enemies in the sky, don't waste prestige on any infantry, you will only have to destroy a bunch of transports and their escorts, and this will not be difficult. I recommend going to the east because there are more transports there are at least 25, and the terrain is much easier to handle for your tanks. Also, don't worry about losing your initial hexes at Vic, just make sure you have at least one airport. Get well soon and meet you at Madrid. The last mission of the DLC is a lazy one. This time you'll have to deal with two enemy factions. The communists and the republicans don't particularly like each other and will try to destroy each other, and you can actually sit and wait until one victor emerges and you just destroy what's left. Although you can certainly plunge into the city and destroy everybody and sustain quite a lot of losses, the mission is still not that difficult, provided you know how to fight in the city. But look at the map. A huge city in the center and lots of open space around it. An encirclement is in order. So my approach was to bring all of my mobile troops to dispense with most of my artillery, except if you still have the 203mm artillery from the first mission, make sure you take one because you will need a long-ranged, fast-moving artillery piece there. So the plan is to hold with your auxiliary infantry troops right next to the city, even though you should try and approach the river in the north and position your troops for the encirclement. Just try not to attract the Republicans' attention. However, most of your forces should go south and southwest and cross the river there, and this is the most difficult part of this mission. That crossing is pretty well defended. There is fortified infantry, there is a strong AA gun and an AT unit, so this is a pretty tight place where it'll be difficult to use your tanks, and this is exactly where you'll need your artillery. Past that, advance north, build up the perimeter with your units, and close the encirclement at the northern bridge. The auxiliary units provided to you will be enough to cover the east. After that, just wait a little, let them starve, and then go in and rake in all the prestige from all of the surrenders. Additional notes, the game will offer you a choice to spend 3 points to get a bunch of I-16 and T-26s. They are not strictly necessary for this mission, and I'm not entirely sure if they'll be very useful in the 1939 DLC. But I did buy them anyway. I like the low core slot cost of the I-16, and let's see if it works. Oh, and I should point out that, while fun, this mission does not reflect the actual events that took place in March 1939 in Madrid. The faction shown here as communists did not revolt against anyone. They actually remained loyal to the official Republican government under President Negrin. The Republican faction in the game represent a coup that took place mostly in Madrid, led by Colonel Casado, who had connections with the nationalist Fifth Column. By the way, Fifth Column is a term coined during the Spanish Civil War. And the idea was that if they toppled the Republican government and took over Madrid and then surrendered to the nationalists, they would get better peace conditions. So they rebelled, they crushed the loyalist resistance in Madrid, which was few in number with some 2,000 men, and the result was that pretty much all resistance across the area held by the Republicans quickly crumbled and the nationalists managed to take over. Unfortunately for the putschists, Franco would not accept anything but unconditional surrender, and so many of them were persecuted and had to flee the country, probably feeling very stupid in the process. And now that the last mission of the DLC is over, let's talk about my impression of the Spanish Civil War DLC. I will point out a few criticisms, but let me tell you that overall I really enjoyed the DLC. It was definitely a huge step forward compared to the original campaign. Obviously it's shorter, but the quality of the content was there. I love the innovations, and I love that the developers are actually trying to change the game and not just make new maps for it. Breaking away from the familiar formula is, in my opinion, the right way to go. However, innovations quite often bring, well, new problems. That'll probably require some time to stamp out. So let me just mention the 3 faction system, which I know some people really disliked, and I really love it. It's a kind of a cooperative experience without having other players. So you've got this faction that you can't use, and you have to adapt to what it does all the time. And plus that Italian and German thing, it's wonderful. My only gripe here is that generally there isn't much depth to issuing orders to nationalist troops. You generally send them to attack on turn 1 and then just close the order menu and forget about it. Otherwise, I'm really looking forward to seeing other DLCs. As far as I know, 1939 is not getting one, so let's see if they return to it. I really like them too. Commendation points was a way to return different levels of victory to the game. I quite like the idea, and that's definitely an excellent way to give some meaning to the secondary objectives. I'm immediately reminded of the Brest Fortress that just gives you 150 prestige. That's silly. However, I'd like to see more options and more interesting options when choosing to spend commendation points. Right now, it's like you either spend commendation points on something really nice and something you really need, or you don't spend any commendation points and you don't get anything. That's not much of a choice, and there is no management of commendation as a resource. If there are more options, say you spend 3 CP to get something nice but not wonderful, yeah, it's okay, but you can spend 7 and get a huge bonus, maybe an objective that will turn from primary to secondary if you spend these 7 points. Something really useful. In other words, make shopping with commendation points a strategically interesting experience. Story. I've seen people criticizing this, and essentially the game has got characters, and debriefings, and livelier briefings. My opinion is that this is a huge step in the right direction, and the new approach is so much better than the dour and dry briefings of the original game. A little bit of drama, a little bit of character development is always nice, but I think that Spanish Civil War goes a little overboard with that. I think that the hints at romance were out of place here, and it's a bit too overly dramatic. Just tone it down a little and it'll be perfect. So this is what I think about the DLC after playing it for about 50 hours, and I'm really looking forward to 1939. And here's a little joke to end this video. What would be the famous Republican slogan if the Civil War took place in Italy? No pastaran! No!